Hey there, and welcome to Authentically ADHD. I'm your host, Carmen, and I am so glad that you're here. This is a podcast where we get real about ADHD. No filters, no judgment, a safe space to explore and learn and grow. If you're here, it's because you want to take a deep dive into the world of ADHD, and trust me, we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. Now, you're probably wondering, why did I start this podcast? Well, in true ADHD fashion, it all started very impulsively. One day, I thought, I should start a podcast, especially with all this paperwork that I have and all these notes that I have trying to understand my own ADHD. And the next thing I knew, here I am, sharing thoughts with you. I don't know, 200, 100 episodes later? I don't know. I lose track of time. I'm time blind. Are you? Anyways, when you have ADHD, ideas come fast, and sometimes you just gotta roll with them. Honestly, this podcast was born out of my passion for understanding ADHD in a deeper way with the newest research. You see, pills don't teach skills. That's something I've learned over the years. Medication can help, and it's a great tool to use, but true growth, that comes from knowledge, understanding, and actionable skills. And so that's what I want to share with you. Research-backed insights, practical tips, and lived experiences of someone who's been there. Now, a little bit about me. I'm not just a host of this podcast. I'm also an early childhood special education teacher, which means I've spent years understanding how children learn, grow, and thrive in ways that work for them, especially when they're neurodiverse. And I'm also a certified life and performance coach, guiding people to unlock their full potential in both their personal and professional lives. But here's the thing that makes me a little different. I'm also a late diagnosed ADHDer. And on top of that, I self-identify as being on the autism spectrum. So when I talk about ADHD, it's not just from a professional perspective, it's from lived experience, because I get it. I know what it's like to feel like your brain is running at full speed while everyone else is moving at a different pace, and you have instructions that are in Japanese and upside down, and everybody else got them in their own language. Throughout this podcast, I'll share all kinds of insights about navigating life with ADHD, from the everyday struggles to the strengths that we can celebrate. We'll talk about everything from time management to relationships to self-advocacy, and all about how to live authentically in a world that often asks us to be anything but. Whether you have ADHD yourself or you want to understand it better, you are in the right place. So, let's get started. Hey there, my ADHD tribe. I have an offer for you. Do you ever feel like you're constantly juggling, but somehow always dropping the ball? You're not alone. We've all been there. I struggle still to manage time, stay organized, and to keep track of the never-ending to-do list. I'm Carmen, and I get it. Trust me, that's why I have created Thriving Authentically with ADHD, Executive Functions and Coping Strategies. It's a course designed to help you take control of your ADHD brain instead of letting it control you. But here's the kicker. It's not just a course. It's a journey. For only $25, you'll get access to about 3 hours of exclusive ADHD-friendly content that breaks down the executive functions in simple terms and explains why your ADHD brain works in the way that it does. And most executive functions, most importantly, it'll teach you practical, research-backed coping strategies that you can start using today. From working memory struggles to time blindness to emotional regulation, we cover it all. Plus, you'll get a workbook in your email packed with interactive exercises to help you reflect on your own ADHD journey, track your progress, and apply what you've learned at your own pace. But that's not all. You also will get 2 personalized coaching sessions where we can dive into your specific challenges and create strategies that work for you. No more one-size-fits-all solutions, just real, authentic, tailored support. And the best part, you get all this for just $25. That's less than a cost of a meal out. Plus, with my proven strategies, you can start improving your executive function skills in no time. Imagine finally understanding your ADHD brain and learning how to thrive and not just survive. Don't wait too long. The spots are limited. Sign up today and let's get started on your journey to thriving authentically with ADHD. Hi, this is a disclaimer that I am a early childhood special education teacher. I am a certified life and performance coach, and I am a podcaster. All right, I am not a medical doctor, and none of this information should be used in supplement of a medical professional and or therapy. Hey there, my friend, and welcome to another episode of Authentically ADHD. Today, we are diving into the unique experience of folks with AuDHD, that is, people who have both autism and ADHD. I'm your host, and I'll be guiding you through this science and the personal stories behind this neurotype. You'll hear why our brains sometimes feel slow or scrambled, why everyday environments can become overwhelmingly chaotic, and what our bodies do when we're overloaded with sensory input. We're even going to unpack the very interesting polyvagal theory, a fancy way scientists explain our body's stress reactions, and tie it into why AuDHD brains respond in the way they do. And, of course, finally, we will cover practical strategies and tools for managing sensory overload. All of this grounded in neuroscience and psychology. Are you ready? Let's get started. First up, processing speed. Think of processing speed as how quickly your brain can take the information, understand it, and respond. Many people with autism describe their thoughts as moving through molasses, not because they're slow, but because every detail stands out. In fact, research shows that adults with autism spectrum disorder consistently perform slower on cognitive tasks than people who don't have ASD. In one study, high-functioning autistic adults who are level 1 autistic adults were significantly slower on all measures of processing speed, like symbol searching or coding tasks, than controls. In practical terms, this can feel like needing extra time to find the words, make the decisions, or complete the tasks. ADHD adds its own little twist flavor. People with ADHD often have what's called a sluggish cognitive tempo, a tendency to daydream, feel mentally foggy, or move through tasks at a leisurely pace. Studies confirm that children with ADHD typically demonstrate slower perceptual and psychomotor speed than non-ADHD peers, especially when tasks get complex. In other words, when tasks demand multiple steps or fast reactions, the ADHD brain can stall. And this has nothing to do with our intelligence. It's all about how the brain allocates attention and effort. When the ADHD brain isn't bombarded by distractions, it takes longer to focus and process the task at hand. For someone with AuDHD, having both autism and ADHD, these effects can combine, and you may notice that your brain feels slowed down in different ways. Maybe you can analyze one detail of a problem super deeply, an autistic strength, but it takes extra time to move on to the next step, or you feel mentally fatigued after filtering out distractions for a few minutes. When processing speed is slow, it can lead to mental fatigue and frustration. Imagine trying to work on a puzzle while watching TV, and it's on, and someone is also talking to you. Your brain is juggling too much, so everything feels slower. In fact, when our brains have to work harder, like over-focusing or double filtering, it uses up its resources. Autism Speaks puts it super clearly. When the brain has to put all of its resources into sensory processing, it can shut off other functions like speech, decision-making, and information processing. This is exactly what processing speed feels like. All resources are on overdrive just to make sense of the basic stuff. So thinking and responding takes longer. So the key point here is that AuDHD brains can feel slower because both autism and ADHD are associated with reduced processing speed. Autistic individuals often process social and sensory information more slowly, and ADHD people frequently struggle to process quickly when distractible. Together, this can make even simple tasks require extra time and energy. This is why someone with AuDHD might say, my brain is on a different clock than everyone else's. Why is this overstimulation so common? Now, why does everything sometimes feel so loud, bright, or clashy to the AuDHD brain? The answer lies in sensory processing. Both autism and ADHD come with differences in how we experience the senses, sight, sound, touch, etc. Many people with autism are hypersensitive to certain stimuli, like a buzzing light or tags on a shirt. And people with ADHD can be extra aware of background noise because their brains have trouble filtering it out. When you combine those, everyday environments can become very overwhelming very quickly. Research has identified a concept called sensory gating, which is basically the brain's filtering system. In regular brains, or brains that don't have these differences, irrelevant stimuli are gated out, or filtered out, or ignored, so you can focus. But when you have autism, studies show deficits in this gating system. The brain doesn't filter out repeated background noise, input, light sounds, or any of that as well. So even the ordinary sounds like lights registering as important, it's just a lot. So as a result, things that others can easily tune out, they keep piling on the sensory load for an AuDHD individual. One EEG study found that autistic individuals showed poor sensory gating and were quickly overwhelmed by irrelevant or multiple stimuli. In real life, that might look like being in a room where other people barely notice the ticking clock or the hum of the air conditioner, while someone with autism feels like each tick and hum is a spotlight on their attention. ADHD brains have a similar complaint from the other side. They literally notice too much. One study found that ADHD adults have an abnormal P50 suppression. This is something that reports feeling like we are flooded with emotional or sensory stimuli. In other words, instead of filtering out the background chatter, ADHD adults let all of it in. We have no filter. It's like letting things in or putting things out. So if you imagine your brain as a radio receiver, a neurotypical brain might tune into one station and suppress the static, but an ADHD brain often keeps many stations at full volume plus the static, all of them playing at once at the same volume. Put autism and ADHD together and having two systems not filtering properly, the result, overstimulation becomes very, very common. A gentle hum is too loud, a flickering light is too distracting, a crowded room is too chaotic. One person with AuDHD might say the world feels like it's speaking all at once and I can't make anyone quiet down. This chronic sensory overwhelm can easily trigger anxiety, a sense of panic, or shutdown. It's no wonder that many AuDHD individuals describe themselves as sensory seekers, so they love certain intense sensations, or sensory avoiders. They avoid triggering environments, depending on the day and the context. Autism Speaks captures part of this picture. Sensory overload can feel like an intense anxiety, a need to escape the situation or difficulty communicating. And crucially, when the brain has to put all of its resources into sensory processing, it can shut off completely. all the other functions, like speech and information processing. So that means during overload, our brains and bodies are they're in full alert just to process the onslaught. So everything else, like talking or thinking, gets parked. Here's a story to help it make sense. Imagine Alex, who has AuDHD, goes into a busy coffee shop with a friend. There's music playing, espresso machines hissing, people talking, candles flickering, and patterned wallpaper on the walls. For most people, these things can blend into the background. But for Alex, each sound and sight hits like a drum. The patterned wallpaper feels dizzying, and the coffee grinder sounds unbearably loud, and even the distant clinking of cups makes Alex's mind jumpy. Every single sensory input triggers a response. By the time the friend orders a drink, Alex is already overwhelmed. Heart racing, ears ringing, brain foggy. Trying to follow the conversation already feels impossible. This is overstimulation in action. The sensory threshold has been passed, and everything collapses under the weight of too much input. These moments of sensory overload are psychologically real. The autonomic nervous system, our body's unconscious stress response system, reacts as if Alex is in literal danger, even though he's safe at a coffee shop. This brings us to the science of this stress response and the polyvagal theory. Here's where the communication challenges happen under this sensory overload. So let's talk about what happens during these overstimulating moments, especially with regard to communication. If your brain is scrambling to process a flood of sensory information, there's little bandwidth left for anything else, including listening and speaking. You might have just experienced this as the world goes fuzzy and I can't think of words. Or I didn't hear what they just said because I was focusing on not panicking about the noise. Or you need them to repeat themselves, but in the middle of repeating it, your brain somehow comes up with what they said. Researchers have studied this cocktail party of a problem in autism. In one study, autistic adolescents were monitored with EEGs while hearing their own name in a quiet setting versus a noisy one. Typically developing teens showed strong brain response to their own name in the noise as expected, and the cocktail party effect that they put in, but minimally verbal autistic teens did not. Their brains barely reacted to their name when background talk was present. In fact, even autistic people who are verbally fluent showed weaker neutral responses to each speech and amid all the noise. The science concluded that these natural deficits may reflect an ineffective processing of salient speech in noisy settings and contribute to language and communication deficits in autism. Translation: when there is sensory chaos, autistic brains can literally fail to register even important speech signals, like, hey, there's a fire. For someone with AuDHD adds another twist. It's easy to get distracted by anything, making it especially hard to focus on a conversation when there's other stimuli around. Even if you're physically present, part of your attention is hijacked by flickering lights or distant music. So a friend might say your name, but you blank out because your focus is tunneled on the bright neon sign behind them or the pattern on the wallpaper, which is an autism effect. And your mind is bouncing from thought to thought, which is an ADHD effect. This hits home as confusion or withdrawal. You might want to answer, but your brain simply can't assemble the words. Autism Speaks describes the result: difficulty communicating or responding as the brain shifts resources to deal with the sensory input. Shut down. It's like your brain shifts into survival mode. Hearing and seeing normal stuff feels like a threat, so it stops processing the language. People often experience this either through a shutdown by zoning out or going mute, or an emotional meltdown, even though they're just reacting to sensory overload. In short, verbal communication suffers when sensory load is high. You may suddenly find it impossible to follow a conversation, read facial cues, or even speak. This is not laziness or avoidance. It's your neurobiology at work. Let's talk a little bit more about the nervous system and the polyvagal theory to understand why this all happens. A key concept here is the polyvagal theory by Dr. Stephen Porges. It sounds fancy, but the idea is that our body has three main modes for responding to the world: a safe, social mode, a flight or flight mode, and a freeze or shutdown mode. So the ventral vagal state is the safe social. This is when we feel calm and connected, like chatting with a friend in a quiet room. The system's engaged, the heart rate and breathing are regulated, and we can easily communicate. Then there's the sympathetic state, fight or flight. When threat is detected, a loud noise, bright lights, or internal signs of anxiety, the sympathetic system kicks in. Heart rate speeds up, adrenaline flows, and the body's readiness to flight or run or fight heighten. It's a heightened alert state. Then there's the dorsal vagal state, the freeze or shutdown. If the threat feels inescapable or too much to handle, the dorsal vagal system may take over. This is the freeze response. The heart rate and breathing slow way down, energy plummets, and one may feel numb or disassociated. It's the body's way of playing possum when overwhelmed. It's like playing dead, so your brain just goes away to avoid it. Our AuDHD brains often toggle between fight, flight, and freeze in response to sensory overload. Remember Alex in the cafe? Every beep and glare was a signal of danger, even though nothing was actually hurting him. So the fight-flight response might trigger heart pounding, stomach churning, racing thoughts, maybe even anger at the environment. If that becomes unbearable, it can switch to the dorsal freeze, and suddenly you feel detached or checked out, unstable, or unable to move or speak. The Spring Source article on freeze response describes it as disassociation, inability to speak or move, and appearing unresponsive or out of it or checked out. When the dorsal vagal system is triggered, many of us have called this going into shutdown mode or feeling like we hit a wall. What's happening in the brain? Key players include the amygdala, the autonomic nervous system, and in autism research, the amygdala, or alarm center, often shows hyperactivity to sensory input. That means even gentle sounds can cause the amygdala to flare up and trigger fight or flight. This hyperreactivity is especially pronounced when multiple senses are stimulated at once. Exactly what happens in a busy environment. So your emotional brain is basically staying stuck in the alert when it really isn't. At the same time, the ANS, the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches, can be out of whack. Some studies show that ADHD is linked to unusual parasympathetic tone, which controls calm and rest, and others find differences in the baseline arousal. In plain terms, an AuDHD person's nervous system may not shift gears smoothly. It may overreact to sensory threats or take longer to recover. Polyvagal theory ties this all together. When the body senses danger, even if it's just a flickering fluorescent light, it pushes you out of that safe and social ventral state and into alert. And you might notice the physical signs: sweaty palms, racing heart, shaky legs. And if that lasts too long, it might slam you into freeze mode, a sudden exhaustion, tunnel vision, or even faintness. The stress response symptoms like adrenaline and cortisol also come into play. Sensory overload triggers that same fight or flight hormone as any other stress. That's why overstimulation feels exhausting in AuDHD. You're literally running on a high stress response just to survive in the regular environment. Over time, chronically being in that state, even a slightly elevated one, can cause anxiety, digestive issues, and constant burnout. In sum, neuroscience shows us that AuDHD sensory experiences aren't in your head, they're your body's biology. Polyvagal's theory reminds us that our nervous system is just doing its job to protect us, even if the threats are things like noise or strong smells. So understanding this helps demystify why we might suddenly feel panicky or shut down. And it shows us that the relaxation techniques really can reset the system, which we will talk about next. But first, a word from our sponsors. Hey there. If you're looking for a game changer in managing your ADHD, let me tell you about something that's made a huge impact on my life. Focused, the adult ADHD group coaching program by Kristen Carter. This isn't just another program. It's a community. It's a roadmap. It's a lifeline for adults with ADHD who want to thrive. Inside of Focus, you'll find weekly coaching calls with Kristen packed with actionable insights, a supportive community of adults who get it. They get what it's like to live with ADHD. You'll get tools and strategies that actually work for our brains. No fluff, just real results. I've been a part of Focus for over a year, and let me tell you, it's where I've learned so much of what I share with you on Authentically ADHD. It's been a game changer for me, and I think it could be for you too. And here's the best part. If you use my link to join, we both save money. It's a win-win. So if you've been looking for the right ADHD support, this is your sign to check it out. Head to the link in my show notes to learn more and sign up. Let's thrive together with tools and support that we need to succeed. Are you also loving what we're doing on Authentically ADHD but want to take your experience to the next level? Well, I have got something for you. Introducing the Authentically ADHD Patreon, your VIP pass to the ultimate ADHD support hub. As a Patreon member, you'll unlock exclusive perks like early access to every single episode, hear it before anyone else does, a treasure trove of resources that I've made, tools, guides, and worksheets to help you thrive in everyday aspects of life, direct coaching opportunities with me designed to help you harness your ADHD powers, and the cherry on top, an incredible community of like-minded individuals who just get it. You're not alone on this journey, and together we can be unstoppable. By joining Patreon, you're not just supporting the podcast, you're fueling a movement. Together, we're breaking stigmas, embracing authenticity, and creating a world where ADHD is seen as a strength and not just a struggle. So what are you waiting for? Head over to patreon.com/authenticallyADHD and join the family today. Let's keep growing, thriving, and showing up authentically together. Hope to see you over there. Back to the show. Okay, now that we've talked about why this happens and what it looks like, let's get practical. What can we actually do about sensory overload and slow processing? Luckily, there are tons of strategies and tools that we can use, and really anyone with sensory sensitivities, including those of us with AuDHD, can use to make life more manageable. So, let's get started. Modify your environment. Whenever possible, reduce sensory triggers in your surroundings. This might mean dimming lights or using light covers in loud settings, wearing noise-canceling headphones or earplugs. For example, playing gentle music or white noise through headphones can mask annoying sounds like coworkers chewing or traffic without making you a mute. As one ADHD blogger put it, wearing white noise cancelers is like manually installing a filter to compensate for my brain's inability to filter out sensory input. Use sensory tools. Keep a toolkit of sensory aids close. These things can include weighted items like a weighted lap pad vest or plush toy for calm pressure or feedback, fidget toys to help occupy restless hands, chewing aids if oral input is soothing, and visual supports like color-coded timers or written schedules to offload that information from the verbal memory. Now, also planning and predicting. Anxiety of the unknown makes overload worse, so whenever you can, prepare for sensory triggers in advance. If you know you're going to a busy place, like a mall or an airport or a lecture hall, consider arriving early to acclimate, use noise cancelers ahead of time, or scope out a quiet corner. Create schedules that include downtimes between big events, or use alarms or reminders to take sensory breaks, stretch, step outside, or do slow breathing about every 30 minutes. Grounding and calming techniques. These tap directly into the polyvagal brake, so when you start to feel overwhelmed, do something to engage your parasympathetic rest to digest system. Slow breathing, like the 4x4, inhale 4, hold 4, and exhale 4, can signal safety to your body. Gentle movement, like rocking in a chair or swaying, can be self-soothing. Humming or singing softly can activate the ventral vagal tone. Even splashing cold water on your face or holding an ice cube can sometimes help you reset your adrenaline. Mindfulness techniques. Notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, etc. That can momentarily distract the brain from overload and bring you back into the present. Therapies like trauma-informed yoga or polyvagal exercises explicitly train the nervous system to shift back to safety mode. Then there's adaptive strategies at work or at school. Advocating for yourself can make a huge difference. If possible, explain your needs to coworkers or classmates. Maybe you need a signal off headphones, talk to me, if someone is trying to speak with you. Or ask for a meeting in advance so that you can process them ahead of time. Use the technology, dictation software if typing is slow, noise-canceling headphones during study time, organizational apps to keep track of your tasks, and build in time for projects to account for the slower processing, so build extra time in. Some people find writing these thoughts down immediately, even doodling or using bulleted lists, helps capture ideas before they vanish in a fog. Break those tasks down into the small steps. Slow processing speed means tasks can feel insurmountable, so tackle one thing at a time, using timers or the Pomodoro technique. Social support and communication. You are not alone in this. Connect with AuDHD or neurodivergent communities to share your experiences and tips. Sometimes just knowing others get it reduces the stress. If sensory overload leads to meltdown or shutdowns, let your friends and family know it's a psychological response. Practice simple phrases or signals to communicate when you need a break. For example, I'm getting overwhelmed. Can we take a pause? If needed, seek professional support. Occupational therapists can design sensory diets. Speech therapists can aid in processing strategies. And therapists can teach anxiety and management techniques. Also consider coaching. That can also help you with individualized goals and things that you want to improve. Then there's self-care for the imposing needs. Having AuDHD often means craving structure, but then the autism means craving novelty. That's ADHD. So finding balance is key. For example, make a routine that includes pockets of spontaneity or like creativity, or schedule both quiet downtime and fun outings. And make your schedule flexible. Honor your body's cues. If you feel sensory buildup, it's okay to skip the social event. Honor your body's cues. If you feel bored, introduce something new or stimulating, like a playlist or a new podcast episode. Recognize that fatigue, or recognizing it, can come from too much thinking as well as too little. Get enough sleep, hydrate, eat regularly. Physical tiredness magnifies sensory issues. Then there's therapeutic interventions. Some may find therapies helpful, like CBT, or that can teach coping skills for anxiety, and mindfulness-based stress reduction has shown benefits for ADHD stress. And in some cases, medication for ADHD and anxiety, when prescribed by a doctor, can help reduce intensity of distractibility and stress reactivity. It's not a cure-all, though. Always work with your professionals that are familiar with neurodiversity. The bottom line is that no single tool works for everybody. But by experimenting and using one at a time and trial and error, you can build a personalized toolkit. Sometimes it's as simple as carrying earplugs in your pocket. Sometimes this is involved by reworking your work environment or daily routines. The key is to listen to your body and brain and honor that sensory input means overload to you, and treat it like a real workload that needs management. Noise management, lights and visuals, touch and pressure, movements and breaks, breathing and relaxation, plan and predict, and advocate for yourself. By combining these strategies, you'll build resilience against overload and managing it like an umbrella for your brain. Some days you'll need a rain hat, music, drown out the noise, and some days you'll need a full raincoat going into a quiet room. And some days you just might get soaked, and that's okay too. Each time you cope with sensory storm, you learn what works for you and what doesn't. We've covered a lot of ground today, like what processing speed is and how we struggle with it, what sensory overload looks like, the communication breakdowns, the neuroscience behind it all, and the coping strategies. So you might want to save this for later to revisit anytime you want. Most importantly, remember you're not alone or at fault for these experiences. AuDHD is common and understandable in light of the science we discussed. Overwhelm doesn't mean you can't handle it. It means your nervous system is simply more sensitive. By learning about your brain and how they work together with your body, you can find compassion for yourself and practical steps to move forward. Thank you so much for listening to Authentically ADHD. If this episode resonated, please reach out or share it. You've got this. Until next time, stay authentic and we will talk soon.